It's 10 o'clock at night. You're tired. Cognitive overhead is high.
Meg, it's like you live inside my head. All of those things. Hi, and welcome to the Good Interview Podcast, the show about design, career, and job interviews. I'm Omri David, Design Director at Pioneer, and today we're doing something a little bit different. Tomorrow is still off, but worry not, as we have a very special guest, a bona fide recruitment superstar, Meg Rahiy. Meg, thank you for coming.
Shalom and Torah. Thanks for having me here.
That's pretty good. Oh, you've been practicing. Let's get started. So Meg, you have been working in recruitment for many, many years. Not too many years. I'm careful with the number, but you've been around. And what's really interesting, you've been working both with Israelis and non-Israelis in Europe, in America, here in a little pool of the Middle East. I was really curious, how is working with Israelis different to working with anyone else?
Oh, we're starting straight out with the hot topics.
But listen, you're talking to a crowd of Israelis, so don't give me the American, compliment sandwich of like,
Okay.
you can be so. No, give us to us straight. We need to hear the truth.
Give you the direct Israeli version.
Yeah, exactly.
It's funny because, I'm an East Coast American. I know we've talked about this. So that part of me is direct. But now that I lived in the UK for 10 years, it's sometimes hard for me to be as direct. So I would say that the differences I see in Israeli candidates, now this is just a generalization, everyone's different, but scrappiness, strong problem solving ability, speed and boldness.
Okay.
And I think a lot of this has to do with, Israel being the startup nation. A lot of people also come from, military backgrounds. They're used to being scrappy, having to make really important decisions quickly and adapting, having to take a lot of initiative and ownership, and being really, I find it refreshingly candid and direct in communication. So I think those are some of the differences that I see from some of the more European or American-centric candidates.
See, these are all good things. Now, give us the garbage. Give us the bad thing. How about I'll start? No, you go. You go ahead. No, I'll tell you what, because I've had the chance to interview people in Israel, people outside of Israel, and first of all, I agree. I think there's this, and I think you put it, perfectly when you say scrappiness, right? We get stuff done. With a small budget, we just go ahead and do whatever we can with what we have, and I think that's always really, really interesting. I'll tell you what, and tell me what you think about that, because I do some mentoring for people specifically who are trying to get hired at Facebook or Meta. And man, those people are so prepared. It's like they're going to interview school. They've got everything. They know their speech by heart. They've got the movements. They've got the eye contact. Right, some of them are over prepared, and the Israelis are really kind of winging it. And it's very different styles. I wonder if you have the same impression.
100%. And I think that, look, it's not a matter of right or wrong. I look at it like a design problem, right? So there's a certain audience that you have, and you want to communicate and connect in a way that your audience will best receive you. And so the nature of the company and the role is going to depend on the nature of the culture that you're entering into. So, for example, when I mentioned in the earlier days when I was hiring some of the first designers for Facebook in Tel Aviv right after the Anavo acquisition, it was a learning for a lot of us. And I think some of it was me setting the expectations of the hiring managers in Menlo Park and saying, hey, you're going to be experiencing candidates that come from a bit of a different background than the Bay Area, right? In the Bay, everybody knows each other. There's a lot of like unwritten rules that people follow. And one of them is just what you said, Omri, which is like very crisp, clear storytelling. Really strong pitches. Everybody's constantly selling themselves.
Yeah, you said it exactly right. It's pitching. They're constantly pitching. They're not interviewing.
And it's more about like, how can I solve the problem? How can we get to the crux of the matter very quickly? How can we, negotiate and align on what the outcomes might be? Whereas when you look at it the opposite way, so like if we have folks who want to get hired by a more of an American centric company, some of the things I might coach them on is how do you have very high level of craft and execution on your presentation, which might mean having someone who's a native English speaker, just check all of the grammar and things like that, and making sure that the visual design is just on a really high bar. And that's a different type of focus than take the strongest problem that you solved and break it down. And it can be scrappy and it can be messy, but as long as we get to the end of it. So I think that's something that I also see in the candidates that I coach for my clients as well is, how can we make that subtle shift? Again, it's not a right or a wrong, but it's how do you show up best for the companies that you're looking to be hired by.
Right, right. Well, so before we actually dive into our big subject, and we're going to be talking about hiring in what we call giant tech, in big tech companies. You obviously have your experience, but let's get to know you first. And we kind of jumped straight into the meat. But let's describe the let's describe the meal for a second. So first of all, Meg Rye, a good I consider you a good friend at this point,
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
and also over 20 years of experience in the recruitment universe. Now, you said a few things that we kind of need to dig into. So first of all, you told me, and I didn't know that you were the first design recruiter outside of America, apparently.
For Facebook, yes.
Exactly. So many years at Facebook, also the first design recruiter that worked with Facebook/Meta Israel. You recruited designers, you recruited design leadership, and in the last year, you've kind of gone on your own way and started your own recruitment and coaching agency called Good Maven, and you'll have to tell us the story around that.
Mhm.
But you said before that it's going really well, and I'm super, super happy for you. But the really important thing that people need to know is how we know each other, because
This is a great story.
it always fills my heart with joy talking to you, because
Mm.
I to this day I kind of consider you my guardian angel.
Oh.
Because it was okay. So here's the thing. I think I was about 29. I was just about to get married, living in London, working in some. I'm gonna choose my words carefully, but probably a crappy little agency, like design agency, working super hard, and then one day I get an email from a Meg Rye at fb.com. I'm like, okay, this is spam. But you basically asked me, hey, would you want to work at Facebook Israel? And I'm like, hell yeah, I want to work at Facebook Israel. And that kind of threw me on this, a few months long journey of interviewing and, talking to people, getting to know you, getting to know the team. At the time they put me on a plane and got me out there to Menlo Park to meet the team, which was really,
Hmm.
I don't think it happens anymore today with all the Zooms and video chats and stuff. But
Yep.
I got
That
to,
was probably a 24-hour trip, wasn't it?
yeah, I think it was a 2-day thing.
Hmm.
And for me, it's not about me, but for me it was like, okay, a trip, fun. Ooh, look at me in business class. But I didn't actually expect to get it. But yeah, at the end of all of that, I got a call and saying, hey, if you want the job, it's yours. And I think
uh,
the next day we started packing and moved to Tel Aviv.
I remember that day. It was just such a unique experience to work with you on that, because I think also you were living and working in London at that point, and I was hiring for both London and Tel Aviv, but I recognized that your name was Hebrew, and I thought, well, let me just ask. Let me just ask if you might be open, because everyone's situation is different, and maybe it's that you didn't have any plans to go to Israel or anything like that, but I just took a chance and asked, and I'm so glad that I did, and that it just so happened that you were literally getting ready to get married and move over, and so everything worked out. But I think also what was really different is that you really invested in yourself and you invested in the process. And that was really obvious from the first time that we talked. So you had so much energy that you just poured into, learning about the culture of Facebook and, what kind of expectations they had in the interview process. And so I think it's really natural that you now coach others, because it's just something that you really acclimated quickly to a new culture and environment and just onboarded so seamlessly.
Oh, thank you. Now I'm blushing a little bit. It's funny. People who listen to the show know I have no problem talking about how amazing I am. But no, the thing is, and again, I'm coaching people who are interviewing to big companies, and it's at this point, like I said, I think everyone is almost overcoached because like, there's
Mm,
so many resources and courses and YouTube videos and podcasts about how to do that. And back then, it was 2014 when I started the interview process. Like none of that existed. It was a complete, I call it a jungle, right? Like it was,
mm,
you got into the jungle, completely dark, unmapped, and I kind of had to learn how to do it on my own. So let's dig into that. So first of all, let me finish like thanking you, because I feel like I need to send you a Christmas card every year.
mm.
And again, I see you. It's kind of like the I was like the small town girl working at a coffee shop, and you walk in like a Hollywood agent's like, kid, you can make it. I'll take you. I'll I'll take you to the big leagues.
That does sound like me. I'm very encouraging.
But really, that what took me into the big leagues, and from Facebook moved to Microsoft, and now I'm a director to another company. So really, that's what brought me into this. Really, the you live in London, the Premier League. Like now I play in the Premier League, and that's so different to everything I've done before. So
Mm.
publicly, thank you again. Like I really appreciate what you've done
Hmm.
for me.
Babaksha.
So well prepared. But let's start digging into that. And maybe this is a good jumping off point, because like I said, I kind of have had to learn how this works on my own, because again, I worked in London, a bunch of little companies, little agencies, and then suddenly Facebook, it's even huger now, but it was a huge company then. But from your experience, and you've done a lot of recruitment for Facebook/Meta, how is that different to any other kind of recruitment process?
Well, I think, and you also were hiring, on the hiring teams when you were at Facebook too. So I know that you have a lot of experience in this as well. But I think Facebook is really different because they just had a very mature design practice, and they also had a very mature design hiring practice, which is different from even a lot of other tech companies. And so what that meant for them is that they really put a lot of thought into, okay, what are the core skills that need to be consistent across every product designer that we hire, right? And then how are we going to make sure that those skills are evident in the interview process? And just creating this really thoughtful, consistent way of being able to assess design talent as it comes through the door. And I think that's even different from a lot of other big tech companies, because there are other big tech companies that are very engineering first, or very, um, you know, very dominated by the business. And so in those environments, there might be a less mature design interview process, potentially a less mature design discipline overall. So there's actually a lot of diversity even within big tech, but I think having a little bit more consistency and clarity is something that can actually be an asset when someone's trying to get into one of these big companies, because okay, what do I need to study? What do I need to bone up on? What do I need to get better on so that I can make sure I can ace the interview process?
Right. And this is something that we talk about a lot on this podcast, the idea that, because I like you said, I do a lot of hiring and I do a lot of interviewing, and I know for candidates who go through this and get a lot of no's, because that's just the name of the game, right? You get 10 to 15 no's until you get a yes, and it feels like everything is stacked against you. But hopefully you can agree that we want to hire. When we have a
Mhm.
candidate walking into the room, we want it to be successful. We want them to do well. We're not trying to test them. We're not trying to trick them. And I
Mhm.
think what you say, and this is probably one of the reasons why Facebook and other companies as well, they provide a lot of material to help you
Mm.
prepare. Like when you walk into a Facebook interview, it shouldn't be a surprise. You should know
Mm.
exactly what's going to happen, pretty much the questions, right? I assume the people you work with are usually pretty well prepared for these interviews.
Absolutely. So I think, that's another reason why it's easy for me to talk about this, because these things are all available on the internet, right? You can either find them on Meta's site, you can find them there's tons of YouTube videos that where current or former designers from Meta and Instagram and WhatsApp articulate the interview process and what they're looking for. So just at a high level, for example, They look for hard skills like product thinking, interaction design, and visual design, and soft skills like proactivity and drive, self-awareness, and intentionality. And so these are already things that you can start thinking about. Okay, how as a designer how can I show that I have these skills? And that might be in a presentation, that might be in sharing examples and answering questions about when you've had to use these skills. And so, yeah, I think that is one thing that you're advantaged by in these big tech interviews, is that you can have a lot of prep to help you be successful. Now, the downside is there's a huge amount of competition, and
Because everyone is preparing.
everyone's preparing, and we have to be real. The market is very difficult right now. I mean, that's a real one. So I think, again, if I put my designer's hat on, I think about it like, okay, ultimately, what are we trying to do? We're trying to give the people who want to hire us a really clear signal about our skills. And this is a great, I don't know, way to prepare, is to make sure that we're presenting ourselves in a way that makes our skills very clear and transparent to the people that are hiring us.
Right, right. It's funny. I try to give that advice a lot. I always come from a storytelling perspective,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
and I tell people when I tell them two things. Number one, when someone asks you a question, the answer almost doesn't matter. Like you should really
Mm.
understand what it is they're trying to learn about you.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Right. So it's like if some like the famous question of like, tell me about a time you didn't get along with someone at work. Like they don't actually care about that time you didn't get along with someone. Like this is not a storytelling kind of, exercise. They want to learn about, problem solving and, conflict resolution. And
Mm-hmm.
then what I try to tell people, like, okay, so start from the end. What it is what it
Mm.
is you want people to learn about you from that
Love that.
story, and then fit
Mm-hmm.
the story to that. So always going
Mm.
backwards.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's a great point of working backwards from the solution. Um, and I think another thing about interviewing, I'm a big believer in like transparency and equitability in the interview process. And I think of it like, ultimately, the hiring manager, I encourage them to say to their candidates, look, I've gotten a strong signal on product thinking or interaction design or whatever it may be, but I didn't get a strong signal on your visual design and your craft and execution. So could you please open up some prototypes and show me a little bit of the quality of your work? And similarly, I encourage candidates to, when they have an opportunity to ask questions of the interviewers, to say, is there anything that you haven't gotten a signal on? Anything that I can, show work that there's been a gap or anything like that? And what that does is it encourages both sides to be working towards a shared goal, right? The shared goal is to figure out, am I a fit for this company? And is this company a fit for me? And so, yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm just a big believer in openness and transparency. And like you said earlier, are we not having like trick questions or anything like that?
Right, right, right. And I always compare it to dating, right? It's the two of us trying to get to know each other to see if there's a good fit. It's
Mm-hmm.
not me testing the other person,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's not passing some kind of test. And I don't know, were you a Seinfeld fan? Were you watching
Of
Seinfeld at all?
course.
So do you? I think it was Seinfeld where um he was trying to invent like a new system. Like why are tips behind the scenes? Why is it in the darkness? And he puts the tip on the table, and
Mm.
every time the waiter does something nice, he puts one more dollar in. So I feel like in interviews it should be that in a good way and not a jokey way, where we need to be very transparent about these are the signals I want to get. Like, and like you said, I had so many conversations behind the scenes during interviews at Facebook when I worked there, because what tends to happen then, a candidate would go through many different interviews, and then everyone gets together into like this committee, and we start discussing the candidate, and everyone has like a scorecard,
Mhm.
right, of what
Mhm.
they're trying to see. And the thing is, if you get a strong signal, then that's great, you can make a decision. But if you have a weak signal or no signal at all, that's a bad thing.
Mm.
And that's not working in your favor. Like people want to have a signal. So if your visual design is not very strong, and you try to hide it and like no
Mhm.
talk about it, no show it, that doesn't help.
Mm.
You can't it again, this is where it's not like dating,
Mm.
right? If you're terrible at like choosing restaurants, you can't just not go to restaurants
Mhm.
for a year. it doesn't work. Like, you have to show all those skills, and like you said, the skills are public. And can you elaborate a little bit? Because so my favorite thing around all of those is intentionality, and I try to talk about it as much as I can, because I think people don't talk about it enough and are not aware of the idea of intentionality. And yeah, you talk about it. Tell
Yeah.
us about intentionality a little bit.
Yeah, so intentionality is one of the three soft skills that Meta looks for in designers, as you know. So proactivity and drive is one, self-awareness and intentionality. So I think that the way Facebook would describe it as intentionality is designing with clarity of purpose about what you want others to be able to do, feel, or create, and how your system either enables or constrains that. So I think that it could be applied systematically to the work that you're doing as a designer on a piece of software. It could also be applied to how you communicate to another person, right? Are you doing it with purpose? Are you doing it with data? Are you doing it in a way that's thoughtful and takes into consideration their point of view? So I think intentionality is sort of like a how we do things, as much as you may look at a hard skill set and say that's more about the what, right? Like what you're ultimately creating in the end. But yeah, Omri, you're ultimately someone who's manifested intentionality throughout your career. So I would put the question back to you.
Oh, Meg, oh shucks, stop it, but keep it coming. No, I'll tell you what, because and that's something whenever I mentor people, and I try to do it as much as I can, as much as my time allows it. So I do simulations. I find simulations to be the best way to prepare. And again, if I may, well, it's only my podcast, but I think people don't do enough simulations. Like, I think people coming in, I call it, they're coming in cold into
Mm-hmm.
interviews,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to practice your pitch at least once out loud in front of a person. You have to run through your deck at least once out loud in front of a person. And when I talk about intentionality when it comes to interviewing, like, people who if you present your presentation and it's not in full screen, or if you're trying to jump between tabs and you kind of screw up because you don't know where it is. Or one of my favorite, and by favorite I mean my most hated thing that a candidate would ever do, is, we start the conversation and I would say the usual, well, tell me about yourself, and they will answer, so what do you want to hear? And that,
Mm-hmm.
for me, that kills it. That kills the mood entirely, because it
Mm-hmm.
shows such lack of intentionality. It's like, it's basically not knowing why we're here. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you had weeks to prepare, do you not know what's going to happen here? Like, why
Yeah.
are you so shocked? So that really, I find people who show intentionality and interviewing with purpose,
Mm-hmm.
let alone what they do at their work, is such a huge lift.
You make a good point too. It makes me think of there's a lot of designers who they are very good at their craft, right? And they no doubt have worked on complex systems. They've created elegant design solutions. And yet when they rock up to an interview and the presentation, the wrapper is not as elegantly thought through, that's a signal. And I think that that's something that I probably end up coaching the most on, right? It's like, I'm not, although I went to art school, I'm not a designer by trade, right? So I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of like this interaction design pattern and whether or not it's better than the other. But what I can see is like, is the storytelling clear? Is the problem that you're articulating clear? Is the business need and the user need clear? Is the impact and like the measurable results clear? And are you sharing it in a way where the information on the screen is not overwhelming me, but it's facilitating like a progressive disclosure and an understanding of what you did and what your role was? So absolutely agree with you on that point. I think intentionality can be shown through the way that you show your work.
Right. And again, that's something that we keep saying on almost every episode. Being a good designer is not the same as being a good candidate.
Mm,
And, like, being a candidate, it's its own skill. And,
mm.
there's a dark side to that. And I've known a bunch of people who are amazing candidates. They can get any job
Oh.
and then completely screw it up when
Uh-huh.
they start working.
Uh-huh.
but and this is another thing that I'm glad you're kind of picking up on, and I'm a huge supporter, so I'm co-signing everything you said. Like, practice being a good candidate. You
Mm,
can't rely on being an amazing designer. It's just half the job.
mm.
And that's intentionality, communication, practicing the questions. Um, I like to say, just don't be a psycho. Like, we
Fair.
talk a lot about the HR interview in the beginning, and it's mostly to do like a sanity check.
Mhm.
Check that you're right for the role, but also that you are a normal human being that we can actually
Mm,
communicate with.
mhm.
I don't know if you want to share some weird stories, but do you get to drop a lot of people during like the first phone interview?
Oh man, I don't.
No names, no names.
No.
It's
Well,
okay.
well, I think back to that idea of looking to make a good match on both sides. And I think maybe where one of my differentiators is as a recruiter is that I've been doing this long enough that I'm really comfortable saying to someone, I don't think that this is a match. And that might be because I ask them lots of questions first about what they want, what they need. Most people recognize what their strengths and weaknesses are, right? And so I then after I hear that and I hold up an opportunity to them, and together we look at it and we say, well, this might have the location you're looking for and the remote work, and you might have a very supportive team to work with, but it's really going to push your systems thinking. And I didn't see in the examples that you shared with me that are e-commerce and it's a tightly scoped project that you worked on. I think this might be a stretch. What do you think about that? So honestly, these are kind of plain regular things that you'd talk about in an interview, but I think that's where I maybe get farther in a first interview is I ask the hard questions, and I'm not afraid to say this might not be a fit, but push back on me. Tell me if you think that I'm wrong. Tell me if you think
Right.
that my assessment is
Defend
wrong.
yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so then we get to a place much quicker than if I just say to every single person, yeah, you're the one, and then ghost them. Or like, yes, you're the one, and then just don't give them feedback or don't present it to the hiring manager or something like that. So again, I just feel like honesty and transparency actually helps everyone get to a much clearer answer sooner.
Yeah, no, that's awesome to hear, and I think, and first of all, I love you, but also
Aw, I love
I
you
love
back.
that approach. Thank you. I love the approach of not just trying to sell in a way, like,
Mm,
yeah, just get me candidates. I'll try to push you through whatever pipeline I can, but
mm,
no, it's about a fit, and it
mm,
should be a good fit and hopefully a long lasting fit,
mm.
right? Because then you get happy business, happy recruiter, happy candidate.
Exactly. Just like, look, when you and I first talked, when I reached out to you, I could have said, hey, Omri, are you interested in an opportunity with Facebook in London? And I would have never, by just me opening the question up a little bit and being willing for you to say no to London, but yes to something else, it just, I don't know. I think you have to be willing to hear the bad news as well as the good news. You know what I mean? And maybe that's a little bit of the directness and the Israeli in me, or that's rubbed off on me, right? Is like, I'm not afraid to say, I think this isn't a match, or I think this actually could be a match. If someone says to me, I don't know, I don't want to work for a big company like Facebook. But if I say to them, well, but I've heard you say that you want to be really challenged, you want to solve problems at
Right,
scale, you want to
right.
do X, Y, Z, it's again still their choice, but at least I offer it up and we have like an adult to adult conversation.
Right. Oh man, I love it. Just
Mm.
yeah, and it's such a design thinking type of way to approach it. Like, let's listen what do they actually say, right? And
Mm.
let's solve the problem that they are presenting to us. But for you, and we don't have to frame it within big tech, but what is a good candidate in your eyes?
Every candidate is like, I look at them as like their own individual constellation of things, right? So there's so many different things that are going to influence what a person is looking for in their next job. But there are some really key things that are consistent to everyone, right? Location, the amount of money that you want to make, the types of problems that you want to solve. Um, and then there are other like more practical things like maybe healthcare benefits are important for you or your family. Maybe you have accessibility needs that are important to you. All of these things can be really boiled down and heard by each candidate. And then I do my best job to match those up with opportunities with my clients that similarly have at least 9 out of 10, or at least a good amount of overlap with what it is that they want.
So obviously this show is very much about interviews, building a career.
Yeah.
And people like to take, there's no silver bullet to this, right? There's no one answer. But what advice would you give to someone who's looking for a job, maybe wants to get into big tech, right? No one can say no to the snack bar and the massage chairs, along or a bunch of other opportunities which comes with working in a big company and talented people. But what can they do to improve their chances to get into this universe?
Yeah, so I think that I look at it as there's two different main areas here. So one is the internal parts, so our own parts, what we can control. And that could be things like our skill set, our knowledge base, our amount of experience. And that we have a little bit more control over, right? Like if I talk to a design expert like you, Henri, and you say to me, Meg, your product thinking is strong, but you really have to work on your visual craft and execution. That's feedback that I can work with, and I can use that to make sure I work really hard to get the craft and execution well on my presentation for my interviews. So those are certain things that we have control over. What we have a little bit less control over is the market, right? Those are external factors. So the market is flooded. There is a lot of churn. There are, jobs open and close all the time. There's so much competition. And yet there are some things that we can do to differentiate ourselves in the marketplace. So for example, networking. And I know that just sounds basic, but make it our job to here's an example. We talked about like engineering with the solution in mind, or with the end in mind, right? Imagine a design director like yourself. You already have a full-time job, right? You're running massive teams, or you're solving these massive problems. It's 10 o'clock at night. You have about half an hour to review 100 resumes and portfolios, and you have to decide which one's going to the second round. You're tired, your cognitive overhead is high.
Meg, it's like you live inside my head, all of those things.
So this is reality, right? So from a candidate's perspective, you want to think, how do I make this as easy to understand as possible, that I have the skills that they need to hire me? And it doesn't mean that you give them the laundry list of all the things. It means make it clear, make it intentional.
Oh man, this is, and again, this is something we say all the time. I'm just so happy to hear it, because I need a sanity check as well for my advice. But I say this is the UX of recruiting, right? It's all about the experience. We need to think about the user, who's sometimes me, who's very tired and got too many kids. But that's exactly it. It's communicate the right thing in the easiest way for that tired person who doesn't have time.
And so back to the how we can help with the external forces is, so if Henri is tired and it's at night, but earlier that day, a colleague sent him a note and said, look, I worked with this person before, that we worked together at Microsoft, or wherever they say, or Waze or Lemonade or something like that. And they say, trust me, they're amazing. You should give them a shot. Now, I'm not saying that this is how interviewing should work. It should be a very, equitable, consistent hiring process. However, if you are looking for as many, I call them encounters, look for as many encounters as you can have with a hiring manager. So maybe it's you message them on LinkedIn. Maybe it's you ask for a referral. Maybe it's you apply and then you, get at them on X, or get at them on another platform, or on their podcast or something like that. These are the ways that humans connect with humans, right? And it's like, I think people are getting really frazzled by AI, and they're thinking, well, I'm not going to have any chance at this job against 200 or 400 other people. Well, like you said, think of the UX of this experience. Think of the UX of the person who's trying to hire you. Here's another really basic thing that people can do. Keywords. This is basic AF.
Yeah, I think this is really interesting for Israelis to hear, because our industry is relatively small. In 99.9% of the times, a human would see your CV, but in big companies, it's not the case, right?
Right. Well, so I understand what you're saying. So in Israel, it might be that you see a candidate and you're like, either you maybe served in the army together, or you go to synagogue together, or your cousins, or your friends, or your coworkers, or you're one step removed from a coworker. So that's another way, obviously, that you can use to get to open the door. But I think another way is keywords, right? So for these bigger companies, there's two ways that I think keywords are really helpful. One is on like social sites like LinkedIn. So there are thousands of recruiters like me every day. We go to LinkedIn, Dribbble, GitHub, whatever it may be, and we're searching. And how do we search? We search on keywords. So we're going to search on things like, of course, location, and maybe you search on schools. So like Bezalel, and that's going to narrow it down from thousands of candidates to maybe hundreds of candidates. And then you go individually one by one, and you might pick the ones that you need to talk to. So that's one way. So keywords will help you be more findable. And then when you apply within applicant tracking systems, there is no automatic you get rejected, right? Unless if it's something like you have to have work authorization and you don't have the visa. But recruiters in big tech companies and startups use the same methodology. So let's say just the other week we posted a job and we got 1,000 applicants within 48 hours.
Jesus.
How am I going to go through all of them? I physically can't, right? So what you do is you'll use keywords and search it down. And it might be, let's say if it's for an e-commerce client, you might use e-commerce or specific e-commerce platforms, right? And to narrow it down from 1,000 to 500 and further. So anyway, that's just a very basic way that if you make sure your CV and resume have the keywords and your LinkedIn has the keywords, your applications.
And by the way, when you say keywords, I think, and it's not just the keywords that are right for me. Also, look at the job description and start matching those, right?
100%. That's exact advice that I give to people all the time. That's where you can find the keywords, because it's not like in the olden days, people used to search on like the prototyping tools, right? Like, gosh, Azure, OmniGraffle, Photoshop in the olden days.
Yeah.
But nowadays, it's like people are less likely to search by a particular tool. They might, and you should have all the tools in there just in case. But it's more about, how do you solve problems? Have you solved those problems in similar domains before? Do you know how to work in regulatory domains like financial services or pharmaceuticals or things like that?
Yeah, I feel like and again, I'm it's hard not to be an old soul after doing this for 15 years, but I find that the industry has gone very granular when it comes to needs, and yes, you'd have someone, a job would open up, and like, yeah, they will only look at people who's done B2B services when it comes to cybersecurity in a company with 100 to 300 people. And it's like, well, even there, you got like 300 candidates. But we go to a place where it's not, again, like 15 years ago, we're like, are you a graphic designer? Okay, you can do
Yeah,
everything.
exactly.
You
You're
can
hired.
do videos, you can do images.
Yep.
Now everything is so specific. And another piece of advice that I give is, and I know writing a good CV, a good resume, is a huge pain in the butt, but you should really have infinite amount of CVs, right? And just tailor it to the job.
Mm. Yeah, because ultimately, like we were saying before, each job you're trying to solve a different solution, right? So although you may use problem solving skills both to hire for a B2B SaaS company as well as for a security company, you might want to highlight that you've worked in different domains, or you might want to highlight that you solve different problems or things like that. So I do believe in really catering. I also am allergic to like one size fits all answers, and I think that like no one answer is 100% right. Like there are some people out there who they don't have to change their CV, and because of, I don't know, they've worked at all the right companies, or their work is just so beautiful and outstanding, they don't have to tailor their resume. And hey, great for them. But if that's not you, then these are some of the things that you can do to help the people that want to hire you get a really clear signal that you have the right skills.
Yeah, and I think, and again, it's kind of it's a thinking trap, the idea of like, this is me, and maybe it's about dating as well. It's like, this is me, and what you see is what you get,
Mm-hmm.
and this is, and if you don't like it, then too bad. But I think in this universe there's a lot of, you can be a different person in different places, right? So I can kind of, and maybe you disagree, and that's fine, but I can fold my CV to look like a design leader, right?
Mm.
But if I decide tomorrow that I want to be an IC, if I want to just be a pixel pusher, I can fold it in a different way,
Mm.
right? And I can
Absolutely.
make myself look perfect for a startup, and I can make myself look perfect for big tech.
Mm.
And I think people don't do enough work of tailoring the CV, the candidacy,
Mm.
in order to fit better the, like you said, the problem they're trying to solve at that point. And there's
Mm.
such a huge opportunity there just
Mm.
by being more mindful of that.
Agreed. I'm curious to ask you as a hiring manager, so how much weight do you give to a CV or a resume versus a portfolio?
So I'm almost scared to say, but if I hire anyone who's, let's say, 4 to 5 years experience and above, I do not look at the portfolio.
Mm. Really?
Um, yes, I do portfolio review. I do a
Mm-hmm.
session,
Mm-hmm.
but for me, looking at the LinkedIn, or just going through like, for me, the experience, that's the credentials. But that's for me. Like
Mm.
I say, if you've done 5 years working in product companies, and I try to look at the scale, I try to look
Mm.
at the industry,
Mm.
and I give enough leeway, because I know what it feels like to be stuck.
Mm.
Like, someone who's done 4 years of cybersecurity, and it's like, well, that's his life. You're cyber, but no, I think designers are a little more chameleon like.
Mm-hmm.
But personally, I don't, unless it's a junior role, I do not look at portfolios until it's portfolio presentation
I
time.
like that. So you really keep your mind open and it sounds like you're focused more on like how they solve problems, what problems they've solved, and then you're able to then map that to the work when you see the work itself.
Well, I try to, I always imagine interviewing as a series of doors, and I think, like, the first door should be relatively loose, right? It's like, I do do you just do you make the cut? Okay, and then you dig deeper and deeper and deeper. But I feel like, looking at, because, and again, we're getting too much into the weeds now, but, like, I find that if I look at a portfolio and I see designs where, like, well, this, I don't like the colors, I don't like the design. Well, and something I tell people, like, open Facebook on your phone. Is this a pretty app? Do you find that to be inspirational? It's really simple, Instagram as well, but it's super effective. And when you hear the stories, the decision, like the design decisions behind it, then the story comes alive. Yeah, so I like to hear the stories behind the stories, and I find just looking at JPEGs is very counter to what we do in product design, right? It's all about, like, I have to understand the story in order to evaluate a person. So I tend to be very, very loose when it comes to the experience, as long as, like, the math works out. Like, okay, that's enough years of experience within the general product universe. That's okay. Let's start the conversation, and then throughout the other interviews, I will get to know them. Hey, here's something, before we go into the next part. Just because I think for the Israeli community, that it's a really hot topic. So if you're not into the Israeli gossip of design, where do you stand on home assignments during a design interview process?
Oof. Well, let me think delicately about how I want to
Be
answer this
careful.
one.
Oh, be careful. This is hot water.
I think that it's asking people to do free work.
Okay.
And I think that I don't think that there's a right or wrong, right? I've seen it be used for success to success, and I've seen it be used as a crutch. So I think where it's not helpful is where founders who do not have a design expertise, they use it as sort of an extra checkbox to get signal that is not really aligned to a skill. It's aligned to like a feeling, right? So
Right,
like
right.
if it's an
Interesting.
engineering founder or like a product oriented founder and they don't really have a good way to assess visual craft and execution, interaction design, and things like that, they might use the exercise as an extra step. that's where I think it's not very useful. In that case, I think what's better to do is is for the hiring company to get very clear on the skills that they're actually asking for in the designer. And if they need to get a consultant or a trusted advisor in their VC fund or something like that to help weigh in on the person's craft and execution. Now, if it's a situation where a company wants to assess a skill set that they feel like doing a whiteboarding session in person is too much, that also tests well only on certain people, right? Not everyone thinks well on their feet. Sometimes people actually do better if they're introverted or they like to think over a longer period of time. And a take-home task might actually be a better assessment of the skill that they can execute. I think in order for it to be successful, it has to have really clear parameters like these are the skills we're looking to test here and not be a mystery, right? Like take this test home and just bring it back to us in a week. Well, if you're doing that, then you're not giving a clear brief, right? So people are going to have a really broad, they don't know, should I ask questions? Should I not ask questions? Is asking questions part of the test or is it not part of the test, right? And it also disadvantages people like parents who might not have hours outside of their workday to execute on these.
Right. Someone who works full time.
Exactly.
They just don't have the time to put into it.
Exactly. So I don't think it's a clear black or white answer, but I would say I'm less inclined to do a take home. I'm less inclined unless if it solves a particular purpose. No, tell me what the Israeli hot take is.
Oh, the Israeli hot take is you give me a home assignment, I will kill your parents. That's pretty much.
We don't want to do that then.
I mean, it's a stance. I respect it, but no, people really, really hate it, and you know, and it, just like you said, it's asking people to do free work, and my biggest problem with it is that people are not very good at writing home assignments, at writing briefs. And
Agreed.
then you get people having to do, you know, like the brief says, don't put more than 4 hours into it. But what you have to do is like redesign our whole platform, tell us what's wrong with it, and, you know, wash my car. And people have to put 20, 30 hours into things that most of them will obviously not go anywhere.
Especially in this market.
And then they do five or six interviews. You know, they have 5 or 6 processes going in parallel. So that's like an 80-hour week just into home assignments. So I completely respect that. And I really like, again, your view that people are focusing on the assignment and not the signal that they're trying to get from the assignment. And like you said, then it ends up with, do I like it or not? But that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to get a signal for a specific thing.
Yes.
So, you know, I think through that answer that you gave, you've been promoted to to the queen of the Israeli design community.
I don't know.
You have a lot of people who want to host you for Shabbat.
Lovely.
So before we go into the next section, which is a question from our community, tell us just a little bit about Good Maven, and that's your own company, and I'll throw a few questions at you, and then you can answer it all at one time. But you know, obviously, I want to hear about the name. Two, about, you know, leaving Meta and doing your own thing, which I'm sure was very scary, and people were raising eyebrows. And obviously how it's going, and because I know you also work with Israeli companies. You said that you work with Monday to populate the new UK office. So tell us all about all of those.
Okay, well, so first one, name, Good Maven. I was looking for something that would combine. So the good is, how do I help people make decisions in their best interests? I think recruiters get a bad name for they just want to make a deal, right? And that is a lot of recruiters, right? But I think that there's a way that you can do it that honors both the candidate and what they are ultimately hoping to get out of an experience, and also the hiring manager. So that's where the good comes from. And Maven is because I want to do this in a skillful and excellent way. I want us to lift up recruiting and hiring and coaching to be done with excellence. And by that, I mean, we understand design and product very deeply And so we're able to speak in an educated way to both our hiring managers and really truly understand what it is that they're looking to hire for. And then similarly, we can work as expert coaches or consultants to our candidates and advise them how to find the best job, prepare for the best job, things like that. So,
right. So Maven is another word for expert, right?
yes,
Okay.
yes. I believe it's a Yiddish word. Doesn't it have Yiddish origins?
I have no idea. I just had to Google
Hmm.
it because I wasn't sure. But it could be.
Because
Okay, that's
it's
very
because
cool.
you're also British. I find a lot of British people haven't heard the word, but a lot of Americans and Israelis have heard Maven.
Interesting. Okay, so
Hmm.
yeah, this is where my fake British accent comes into play. So I have an excuse. So okay, so you tell us about that day where you get up and you're like the hell with all the snacks and the and the beautiful kitchens. I want to do my own thing. What went through your mind?
Well, interestingly, before I joined Facebook, I had actually planned to, I was working at an agency at the time doing business development, a design agency, and I had planned to leave and start my own design recruitment company in New York. And I was this close to doing it, Henri. I was this close to starting it. I had like the LLC set up and I had the funding set up, and
Amazing.
this was my dream. And then Facebook, who I had spoken, this was back in 2014. I had interviewed with them in 2010. And this was when they were starting to build the London office. And they said, "Do you want to do software engineering recruitment?" And I was like, I could. And I really want to move to London, but design and product is my passion. They called me back 4 years later and said, "We're finally going to start building the first product teams outside of the US in London." And then in Israel, because they had just acquired a NAFO. And so they were starting to hire their first internal designers. And I was like, this is an opportunity of a lifetime. Like, never again am I going to have a chance to be the first design recruiter for a company like Facebook. We're at the point that they were then.
Right, right.
So I put my dream on hold to start my own company, and I'm so glad that I did. And so this was 10 years ago, came over. My husband is British and Irish, so I moved with him. And yeah, and at that point there were, I think, 3 or 4 designers in the UK office. They were visa orphans for the US who were kind of just staying there. I think there were 6 or 7 folks in the Israeli office. And when I left last year, there were almost 1,000 people across product and design in the UK, remotely throughout EMEA, and in Israel and Singapore. And I'd say about 700 of those were designers, content designers, user experience researchers, and artists. So, like, for me to have worked at that scale was just like it was a dream come true.
No, that's amazing. What an amazing story about serendipity and
Mm,
finding your way into another dream
mm,
and then getting back to the original one. So let's talk
yes.
about that one, the original dream.
Well, so I think, you know, it's no mystery that Facebook's been going through some stuff over the past couple years, and they had all the layoffs and that sort of thing. So the international product recruitment team had built up to about 50 people. The entire team was laid off except for myself. Back, this is 2 or 3 years ago when all the layoffs were happening. So I was now working across, data science, product management, product design, content design, user experience research, design program management, across all of EMEA and APAC. And I looked around and I said, you know what? I accomplished what I came here to do. I came here to build the first design teams outside of the States, for Facebook. And I'm so proud that I was able to accomplish what I did through the support of my team and everything. It's time. It's just time. And the thing is, you have the golden handcuffs on, and it's like nothing's ever going to really happen to pull you out of there, unless if it does, right? Bar
Yeah,
a
yeah,
layoff.
yeah.
And so I just said, you know what? It's either now or never. I'm in my late 40s, and it's like it's either now or never. So I just decided one day, and luckily I had the support of my partner, and I had a funder to help fund the company. And so that's what I did. So yeah, it was actually a year ago on April 22nd. And how it's going really well. I mean, the market's crazy, right? It's a little bit up and down and all over the place, but I think what I realize now is my differentiator is that I deeply understand product and how important that is to as a skill to both to all kinds of design roles and product roles and things like that. And so yes, Monday is one of our beloved clients, and they came to us when they wanted to start building their first teams outside of Israel in London. And so we've been helping them make some key hires there. And there's a lot of former friends from Meta and Facebook who work at Monday and things like that. So yeah, I would say we are working with a lot of early stage startups who are very product led, a lot of folks in the AI space, and then some of the bigger tech companies that also, they have more mature design practices and they want to hire really great folks.
That's amazing. I'm super happy. Not that you need me to be, but I'm super happy for you.
Mm,
Going after that, and I know how hard it is to say goodbye to big tech and everything that goes
mm,
with it.
uh-huh.
Financially and just the way of life. But yeah, I'm so happy to hear that you're doing really well, and
Oh,
and I
thank
and I
you.
and I hope it will keep growing and growing. So Meg, let's go into the next section. So we have this big Israeli design community, and we have a Facebook group, and every now and then they kind of post different questions. So we like to take a question that might be relevant to what we talk about and try to answer it here, whether they like it or not. So here's this week question, and loosely translated from Hebrew. So here we go. It goes like this: are there really mom appropriate jobs out there? Every job posting I see, either all or mostly from the office. I was once told to hire a babysitter, but I didn't give birth just so other people would raise them for me. And I feel this situation is preventing me from staying in this profession. So Meg, what we lovingly or not lovingly call mom jobs. Do
Mm.
they exist, and what do parents what can parents do to get a job that can allow them to have a career and raise kids at the same time?
I guess first I just want to validate how challenging it can be to find these jobs, right? And the industry still has a far way to go to create more equitable, accommodating opportunities for parents. So I just want to first of all say that's real. That said, okay, within these barriers, how can we find ways to get what we want? So um, I think that a lot of these jobs are not always visible and they're not labeled in a way where we can know that they will be more flexible. So it does put a little bit of the onus on us, on parents to sort of search for it. But I think some of the options could be like part time, freelance, job sharing, consulting, or fractional work. And a lot of these are, again, through like word of mouth or through just trying, right? Some of this is a hiring manager might be open to it and the company might be open to it, but the hiring manager just doesn't know how to do it. So I would educate myself as to what are the exact kinds of opportunities that I want. Do I want part time? Do I want more flexible hours? Like, what is it that you want? And then seek out companies that may offer that or seek out people in the companies that you're targeting and see if they may offer that.
Yeah, and that last part is really interesting because again, I have three kids, young kids. So my oldest is 7, my youngest is 2. So I've been jumping between companies whilst making humans.
Hmm.
And it's I know what people talk when people talk about mom job, they think about moms, but I try to be available for my kids as well. It's important to me, and I find that what the job says on the tin is not exactly what the reality is in a lot of times.
Hmm.
So I find that actually finding someone in the company who's working there and
Hmm.
getting the lowdown from them, because they can easily tell you like, yeah, they said like you need to be in the office 4 times a week, but actually I only go twice. Like once you find your ground, you can kind of be more loose about it. And I know they say you have to work until 5, but really, but around 3:30, I can kind of skip out. Or the opposite. Like I've known companies where people told me, listen, if you want to have a life, this is not the company for you. And it's
Hmm.
like, okay, fair enough. It's good for specific people. It's good
Hmm.
for certain times. But personally, at least, and maybe I'm just lucky, but I find that most companies are more flexible that they would let on, and maybe again, sanity check. Let me, tell me what you think. I find when it, and there's a point, there's something to say about transparency and being direct, but I also find that when I talk to a candidate that comes with a whole list of like, now listen, I need to pick up my kids at 3, and I have a hair appointment at 4, and I need to be available at 5, and it's like, okay, sounds like trouble. And it's
Mm,
very different to if the person is already on the team and, at that point, do whatever you want. So
mm,
I find that maybe when people, again, it's like dating, when you come in with such a high bar on the first date, it's harder to make a connection and find that flexibility. Am I being too
mm.
optimistic?
Well, with going back to the origination of the question being mom appropriate, so in my mind, that makes me think, okay, we're taking time off to have the children, to have our children, and then we're re-entering the workforce, and so that doesn't always afford us that same. I've been on the job, and now I need to make it go part time. Or it may not, but I think this goes back to what we were talking about intentionality. So the way that you said it a moment ago, Omri, it's a very different way to say, I need to be gone by this time because of XYZ. That may sound demanding. Instead, maybe we can say it in a way like, hey, I have a family. So it's really important to me that the next role that I have, I will give you my all, but I need to pick up my kids at 3. Is that a possibility?
Right,
It's
right,
reasonable. It's reasonable, and it doesn't center yourself. It's taking into consideration that the company the company needs you, and your kids also need you, right? Um,
right.
but I think also there's like certain things that are different about different kinds of jobs, right? So startup and tech, I think, are better at offering remote and hybrid kinds of roles if that's important to people, but they probably still expect that full-time intensity. So that may be work for some people, but not for others. Public sector or like nonprofits, sometimes they may have a better work-life balance, but of course, or may have fractional roles, but of course the salaries are often going to be lower. So I think that's back to this no one size fits all answer. It depends on what kind of flexibility you need, and then seeking out a place that you can find that. I think also, just back to what we were saying earlier about networking being such a strong facet, especially in Israeli culture and communities, of finding opportunities. So, maybe I think one of the ways we tapped into this at Meta was like Anglo-Olim networks, right? So when people are moving from other places and coming to Israel, it's like, how can you tap into jobs they may have found that are more flexible to them? I think Kama Tech is another one within the Orthodox community, right? So how might we share resources and opportunities with other folks that may have similar needs to ours? She Codes Israel, I think, is another one, Women in Tech Israel. So these are good places that we can go to aggregate information and see who else might have found a way to make it work, and how could we make it work as well.
Meg, I just want you to know how much it hurts me to see that you know the industry better than me.
Oh, no.
And I'm ashamed. I'm ashamed that you know all these tricks and all these different groups and all these different
Hey,
places. Good for you.
yeah, but you know a lot more about design than I do. This is my job.
Design's easy. I'm just pushing pixels. What you do is hard. All right. So I really hope that helps a little bit, the person who asked the question or anyone else listening. So good luck. Hopefully you can find something that can facilitate growing humans and growing pixels.
Hmm.
So Meg, before we finish every episode, we like to give a little bit of inspiration, something for people to think about, something to see. As the guest of honor, this is your turn. So give us a little bit of inspiration.
I think my biggest piece of advice is, look, I know we're in a specific time and place right now in the tech industry where it's tough, right? I just want to validate that it is tough out there. The market is very difficult, but there are certain things that you can do to control the bits that you can control, right? So I think listening to a lot of the tips that Henri and I have been talking about today, make your pitch really clean, really clear. Do lots of practicing when you're interviewing. Do practice runs and dry runs so you make sure you show up your best. Use keywords when you're searching for jobs, whether it's on LinkedIn or when you're applying for jobs so people can find you. And don't be afraid to network, and don't just apply, right? Like always do something extra to try to make your way in. So those are my top tips. And It's just been such a pleasure to reconnect with you, Henri, and thank you so much for allowing me to be your first English speaker on the show.
Oh
And
man,
toda.
Meg, you're amazing. And you know what's amazing? I love that your inspiration is just listen. Just listen to what we say. Just listen. We give good advice. We are good people. Just listen
No,
to
no,
us.
no.
But this is amazing. Meg, thank you so much for taking the time, joining us. Good luck. Good luck with all your work. And I hope to see you only do more and more amazing things. And next time I'm in London, which is probably very, very soon because I've got a family,
Mm.
we are 100% hanging out.
Lovely. And hey, you never know. I might come back to Tel Aviv as well. So,
Calm down. Oh man, I'm so I'm excited just thinking about hanging out with you.
mm.
So thank you, Meg. And this is a good point to say thank you for joining us on the Good Interview Podcast, the show about design, career, and job interviews. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you enjoyed this week's episode, why not tell a friend? Next week, we're back to Hebrew, but I can't promise there won't be more fake British accents. See you then.
So, sorry, Henri. I went off on a tangent and I forgot the
That's
question.
okay. Go. I'm
I
following
hope
you.
we cut
It's all
this part
good.
out.
I'm with you.
What was the original question?
Who the hell knows? No, what's